The sun had teeth that day. It bit into the earth until the prairie shimmered and the air itself seemed to warp with heat. Dust swirled in the windless street of Dry Creek, Kansas, coating clapboard buildings and settling on the weathered sign that creaked above Graham's Mercantile. Horses drooped in the shade, tails flicking at flies. The whole town felt like it was holding its breath for the woman stumbling across the street. One hand clutching her faded skirts, the other Amelia Brooks hadn't eaten in 3 days. The last heel of bread she'd saved was gone. The small purse that once held Missouri banknotes was empty. Long since traded for train fare and a borrowed bed in a livery stable, she could taste copper and dust in her mouth as she reached the store's porch. Just a few steps more, she told herself, and maybe she could trade the only thing left. She didn't remember climbing the stairs. She only remembered the slam of the door against the wall and the cool dimness inside. The shelves lined with sacks of flour, coffee beans, and rough tools. Her knees buckled, catching on the wooden floorboards with a hollow thud. Heads turned. 2 ranch hands leaned against the counter, looked up, frowning. Behind the counter, Graham himself, broad, balding, eyes sharp as flint, grunted, annoyed. "You all right there, miss?" She swallowed, tasting bile and shame. Her hand shook as she reached inside her pocket and pulled out a plain gold band. It was warm from her body and heavier than she remembered. "I need food," she managed. "Rice, beans, anything." Graham looked at the ring, then at her. He didn't reach for it. "That don't fill bellies," he said flatly. "Money does. Work does." "It's gold," she whispered, fighting a tremor in her voice. "It was my wedding ring." His gaze softened for half a heartbeat, then shuddered again. "Gold don't cook supper. Times are hard for everyone." Something inside her cracked, not with anger, but with the kind of bone-deep despair that makes breath tremble. She stared at the ring in her hand, at the tiny circle of a life gone, and wondered if maybe this was the end of the road she'd been staggering down since Thomas died. A voice from behind startled her. "Put it on my tab." "Graham." The words cut through the stale heat. Amelia turned, dizzy, and saw a man filling the doorway. He was tall, broad-shouldered under a faded work shirt, a sun-browned skin and hair the color of wheat, left too long in the field. His eyes clear, steady blue met hers, just long enough to make her pulse jump before he looked back at the storekeeper. "Bag of rice. 2 sacks of beans. Coffee, too." Graham hesitated. "Luke Dawson, you know your account's already at it?" Luke said, his quiet but firm. For a long breath, the only sound was the fly buzzing near the window. Then Graham shrugged, started scooping beans into a burlap sack. Luke's gaze returned to Amelia, not pitying, but something else measuring. Perhaps or maybe just seeing her when no one else bothered. She realized she was still on the floor and forced herself upright, swaying. He stepped forward before she fell, one strong hand catching her elbow. "Easy there." Her throat closed. The words wouldn't come. Pride and gratitude tangled and turned raw. "Eat first," he said softly, as if that were the only thing that mattered. By the time she blinked back the blur from her eyes, he'd paid and was handing her a small sack with the beans and coffee already tied inside. "There's a boarding house across the street. Mabel Green runs it. Tell her Luke sent you." She set a plate. She clutched the food like a lifeline. "I can't pay you back." His smile was small and tired, but not unkind. "Didn't ask you to," and almost as an afterthought, "Could use a cook out at Dawson Ranch, though." Her head snapped up. "A cook? We're short-handed. My PA can't do the work alone. 8 men to feed, sometimes more. You know your way around a kitchen?" She hesitated, heart hammering. Thomas's store had been full of silks and tea. She'd known accounts, not cattle, but she'd kept a household once. She could bake bread, stew beans, and keep a fire alive. Survival teaches more than comfort ever did. "I can cook," she said, though her voice shook. "Then think on it." Luke tipped his hat and turned for the door. Sunlight haloed him for a moment, bright against the gloom. "Eat first," he repeated, and left. Mabel Green was a soft-eyed woman with hair going silver and arms like an old oak tree, steady, strong. She fussed over Amelia as if she'd been waiting for her all along. Clucking when she saw the gaunt cheeks, the trembling hands, a plate of stew appeared, thick with carrots and onions. Amelia ate until she cried, silent tears dropping into the brown broth. Mabel didn't ask, didn't push. She only poured coffee and said, "After a long quiet, we all start somewhere." Honey, Amelia wanted to say she had started before that, once she had had a house with curtains and books. A husband who read poetry under a Missouri porch swing, but that house was gone. It's taken by fever and bankers and a world that didn't care for widows with empty hands. Later upstairs in a small, clean room with white curtains. She looked at her ring again. Luke Dawson had seen her at her lowest and hadn't turned away. A stranger. Why? She didn't know. But the idea of a job, of a place to belong, flickered like the first spark of a long-dead fire. Next morning the sky was pale and wide. Hawks, turning slow circles overhead. Luke's wagon rattled into town just as Mabel pushed Amelia out the door with a bundle of bread and cheese for the road. "Come back alive," Mabel said with a wink. "Them Dawsons are good folk, but the prairie's hard." Luke nodded a greeting. "Ready." Amelia climbed onto the wagon seat, skirts gathered tight. She was aware of curious eyes peeking through shop windows, and across the street the town always watched newcomers, especially ones alone. She kept her chin high anyway. The prairie stretched endless as they rolled out of town. Waving grass and distant cottonwoods breaking the horizon. Luke didn't talk much. When he did, his voice was a low, steady rumble over the creak of the wheels. "Lost your husband," he said once, not as a question, but as fact. She swallowed. "Yes," he nodded, gaze fixed on the road. "Sorry." The simple word loosened something in her chest. No pity, no advice. Just sorry. After a while he said, "My ma died a few winters back." Pause, still kicking, but slower. "Been holding the ranch together since?" "We get by. You were kind yesterday," she said quietly. "You didn't have to be," he shrugged. "My ma wouldn't have left anyone hungry." It silenced them both for a while. Dawson Ranch appeared like an outpost against the wild weathered barn. Fences stretching toward nowhere, house squat but sturdy with smoke curling from its chimney. Dogs trotted to meet them, tails up but wary. An older man stepped out onto the porch, tall but stooped. Gray hair swept back, eyes the same clear blue as Luke's, but softened with age. "Pa, this is Amelia Brooks," Luke said. "Cook, if she wants the job." Samuel Dawson studied her with a slow, measuring gaze. Not cruel, just careful. Then he nodded. "You look like you could use a place, and we sure could use a cook." Relief made her knees weak. She only managed a faint smile and a whisper of thank you. Inside, the kitchen was a disaster pants, blackened with old grease, counters coated in dust. Something about it felt like her own heart. Neglected, but salvageable. She rolled up her sleeves and started cleaning while Luke and Samuel unloaded supplies. By sundown, beans simmered on the stove and cornbread baked golden in the oven. The ranch hands rough, sunburnt, smelling of leather and sweat filed in with wary glances. One grinned after tasting the food. Another tipped his hat. Just like that, a fragile peace formed. Luke lingered after the others left, drying a pot with a rag that looked comically small in his big hands. Not bad for day one. She arched a brow, surprising herself with a flicker of teasing. "I'll try not to poison you." His mouth curved slightly. Then, almost shy, he reached into his pocket and held out a few wild flowers, pale and dusty, but stubbornly alive. Ma liked to keep them on the table. The gesture hit her somewhere deep. She set them in a chipped jar and felt, for the first time in months, the faint warmth of belonging. That night, in the narrow bed Mabel had lent her, Amelia stared at the ceiling and tried to name what had shifted. She was still hungry, still lost, still haunted, but she was also needed. That was something. And maybe, just maybe, she wasn't done yet. Outside, Prairie whispered to itself, endless and merciless but not empty. Somewhere in the darkness, Luke Dawson's footsteps faded across the porch. Steady and unhurried, as if he, too, had found a reason to hope.